poll, what I see is about 31% say they know a lot about Cities for CEDAW, but 69% of you say no. So that means that we're really going to take a look at what is CEDAW and why are we here. So I will start with that idea because CEDAW itself is something that we all need to understand very thoroughly in this process. So it is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. It is the only UN human rights treaty that ensures gender equality and women's empowerment, ratified by 189 countries. And as some of you know, that although President Carter signed in 1980, the US has not ratified. But in 1998, San Francisco in the United States became the first city in the world to make CEDAW a legally binding ordinance, making the global local, setting a shining example of really bottom-up implementation. The architect of that campaign is our co-moderator for today, Krishanti Demiraj, who you will meet in a few minutes. Then, as the years went by, in 2014, when I was chair of the NGO Committee on the Status of Women in New York, we launched a campaign called Cities for CEDAW to commemorate Beijing Plus 20. And since then, more than 70 US cities and counties and states have ordinances or resolutions on CEDAW. Our session today takes a look at that campaign, but it also highlights cities in countries that have already ratified, notably Colombia, Austria, and Iceland. So excited to have CEDAW seen from the point of view of countries that have a long history and experience with that convention. So why are we focused on women's rights in cities? Let me just say a few words about that. I was at a session yesterday during the Commission on the Status of Women. Habitat, which is the UN entity that deals with human settlements, was pointing out that more than 60% of women and girls live in cities right now. But by 2030, their estimates are almost 75%. If you look at the crises of our times, climate change, cities are contributing more than 65% to greenhouse gases. But as Mayor Garcetti of Los Angeles has pointed out, they are also engines of change and engines of innovation. And furthermore, you can measure the impact of your policies, the impact of discriminatory practices much faster and often much more accurately than federal governments can do that. So cities are really important parts of our civil society structure, and we can innovate in those cities. And we're going to hear a lot about what cities are doing there. So today I want to introduce right now Krishanti Demiraj, my dear friend, who is a human rights advocate, who is talking a lot about Human Dignity Index these days. She's a member of the UN Spotlight Steering Committee, which works on combating gender-based violence, violence against women, and former director of the Center for Women's Global Leadership at Rutgers University. Krishanti, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be with you today. Pandemic taught us that life is impermanent, imperfect, and incomplete. And the Japanese would call this wabi-sabi. But within this context, cities in the world, predominantly where women have been in leadership, have taken innovative approaches to ensure that human rights of their communities are respected, protected, and fulfilled, right? Sun Yun just spoke about why cities are critical for the sustainability of people and the planet. And today we are going to hear from some extraordinary leaders from incredible cities as to how change is happening in a way that the world could be sustained, right? And our children and our grandchildren will have spaces where they could thrive. So without further ado, I would really like to move this conversation and really go to the Secretary of Women's Affairs, the city of Bogota, Diana Rodriguez. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I am Krishanti. I'm trying to start my video, but it says it's being put on hold. Okay, great. Now I think I'm able to do so. So thank you so much. And if my team can help me project my video, that would be great. So thank you so much in particular to Change for this invitation, but also for making us part of a very enriching alliance, which has given us a lot of food for thought and forced us to think more thoroughly of the care system and others of our services in Bogota. So let me present now what I believe is the core of transformation and public innovation at a city scale. And I'm happy to talk about Bogota's care system, which has been Bogota's main innovation under the administration of our first woman-elected mayor of Bogota, Mayor Claudia Lopez. Next. So let me take you to Bogota. Bogota, or bring you to Bogota, I should say. Bogota is a city of roughly 8 million people, 52% are women, and rest are men. And we're divided into 20 districts, and we also have a big rural area. Next. And we decided to do, based in this, for this city, we decided to address innovation, to create a care system, which I'm going to anticipate my arguments and then continue, which has really addressed innovation in 4 levels. One, when I'm talking about the care system, I will argue that it's a human-centered innovation. We tend to think of innovation more and more around apps and artificial intelligence, but this is a human-centered innovation that, of course, has tapped into technology, but it's notably a human-centered innovation. It's also, and closely related, a social service innovation. It's related, and it's at the core is how do we provide social services at the local level? It's also a city planning innovation because we're reorganizing a city for women. Cities across the world have been designed and planned by men. But what if we complement our conception of a city and see what are we missing? What can the gender approach to a city bring? And lastly, it's a bureaucratic innovation because with this care system, we are going from silos, which is how usually governments work, to working in a more integrated fashion. And there's another innovation also because we go from building and constructions, which is usually what many administrations are measured for. How many new schools did you open? How many new buildings? Like how much more concrete was added to your city? How many roads? But we changed the lens and said, how can we optimize a city? What is there to use and to use for social service provision? So I will argue that our care system is innovative at those 4 levels. Next. So going back to the 4 million women that live in Bogota, 1.2 million women are dedicate their time mainly to unpaid work. That means to devote their lives an average of 10 hours per day to cooking and cleaning and taking care of children and the elderly with disabilities and caring. All that is done in an unpaid fashion. So what does that translate into? Female caregivers that work with no pay are trapped in, they have no economic autonomy. Most of them have been forced to abandon high school because they're asked to care. most of them are low income, and 2 out of 10 have been diagnosed with both mental health and physical health issues derived from that care burden. So what does this all translate into? Not only economic poverty, but most notably time poverty. And time poverty is a structural cause of gender inequality. And that is what we wanted to address in Bogota. Next. So we built a care system. We designed and implemented a care system. What is a care system? Our care system articulates new and existing services to address care demands in a shared responsible manner between the city governments, the national government, the private sector, communities, and households to balance the provision of care. So caregivers have time to pursue personal development, self-care, well-being, income generation, and even participate in politics. With no time, women are deprived of basic rights and are left behind. And if we want to leave no one behind, we have to start by catching up and giving women time. So ultimately, what are the objectives of our care system? The 3 R's. First, we want to recognize the contribution of caregivers and identify care, recognize what care is. It is very common in Bogota and across the globe for somebody to ask, what does your mother do? Oh, no, she doesn't do anything. What do you mean she doesn't do anything? No, she's always at home. Okay, and what does she do at home? Oh, she cooks and cleans and takes care of my grandfather and my nephew and her and another grandchild. But no, aside from that, she doesn't do anything. Well, no, she's sustaining life in families and societies by doing unpaid care work. So we need to change that. We need to start by recognizing care and the contribution of caregivers. Second, we need to redistribute the responsibility more equitably between men and women, and also beyond the household. That's why the city government has a role. And then ultimately reduce unpaid care work so women have time to pursue their lives and dreams. So who are the beneficiaries of this care system? 3 groups of population. 1, caregivers, mostly women, female caregivers, but also men and non-binary caregivers, of course. What do we offer caregivers? We offer them what they've sacrificed because of the care burden. Education, programs like finishing high school in a flexible manner, regardless of their age, learning how to use computers and cell phones, financial courses, everything, all the educational gap that has derived from that care burden. So we offer them that. Second, we offer them well-being services. For example, yoga classes, dance classes, free psychological and legal aid services. They can even wash their clothes in a free laundry and washing machines. And thirdly, income generation strategies. So we offer caregivers that, but the core of it, the essence is, and the innovation is that at the same time, we care for those they care for. We offer them professional and playful activities. For instance, to the children under 13, the elderly who require care, or persons with disabilities who require care. And so that removes the barrier that women face all the time. Women say, I would love to finish high school, but when will I be able to do it? Who cares for my grandfather and grandson? Or I would love to go to a yoga class or learn how to ride a bike in the bike school for women. But who cares for the person I care for or for the people I care for? Well, then we care for the people they care for at the same time and in the same locations. And the third population are men and families. And so men, why? Because we can all learn to care. We need workshops for cultural change. We need cultural transformation workshops in which women and men understand that care can be shared. And so women also, we don't feel guilty that we're sharing the care responsibility. Next. So where does all this land? This lands in care blocks, care buses, and home assistance. Next. And so let's go to care blocks. Care blocks are areas within the city where services from all the different sectors, from all the different secretariats or ministries at the city level, offers services to these three populations in the same space in an articulated manner and integrated manner. So this is the ideal care block. The ideal care block always has an anchor building where there's a coordinator, where most of the services are provided. But at the same time, whether in the same building or one just close by, we offer care services for care receivers, for the children under 13 or the elderly with who require care. So those are the two green buildings. But in addition, the care blocks are seen as ways to transform urban planning. We bring in circular transportation routes. We have a public space that can be used to provide well-being to the caregivers and care receivers. And so care blocks operate under three principles: simultaneity, flexibility, and proximity. Simultaneity, as I was mentioning, is the essence of care blocks. We offer services for care receivers and for caregivers. So the key block and the key obstacle for caregivers to access services can be overcome. Then flexibility. We've been using existing infrastructure, and I'll show that in my next slide, which shows how we use existing infrastructure in buildings to start these care blocks. And the last principle is, can we go back, please, to proximity, which is proximity in not only in offering services to the care receivers and to the caregivers in the same close space, but also close to their homes where people live or work, and that it's close to caregivers. So in care blocks, services can be accessed at most in a 20-minute walking, like 20-minute by foot. Next. So that is the ideal care block, but these are the existing care blocks. This is the second care block we open in Bogota. That's a picture of the anchor building. The anchor building was an existing infrastructure, which we transformed and optimized to make it a care block. So in that anchor building, we have a swimming pool, a theater, auditoriums, classes, a kitchen where we teach care school for men. And there all the city sectors offer services simultaneously. So the Secretary of Education offers flexible high school so we can finish high school in a flexible way. The Secretary for Women offers digital and computer classes and so forth. But we also learn how, for instance, by School for Women, which can be seen there on the picture, or public laundry service, or care services for children or for the others who require care. All that is offered in the same space. Next. And so that is a care block in practice. It has an anchor building, which is the community-centered number one, the one I showed initially, and that groups most of the services. But the care block is more than just a building. It's articulated to the other infrastructure close by that brings together and that has been transformed to offer care services for the three populations. So in addition to the anchor building, for instance, a public school just 5 minutes away can offer formation and finishing high school to women on a Saturday while the children are cared for in the same facility, or the public park. That is where we hold bike school for women. So it's all been articulated and around the issue of care and tailored to those three populations. Next. So as I was mentioning, in all of the care blocks, we offer cultural transformation. You can see that's care school for men. Next. And that's another care block. That's another care block. That was the first one we actually offered, which is anchored in a cable car, because part of the problem that women face is that we cannot access the services because we devote a lot of time to caring. We go from one part to the other of the city, right? It takes us 10 minutes from here to there, 1 hour to the other part of the city. And we're always thinking of the people that require care. But what about caregivers? So that's why anchoring one of these blocks in the cable car reduces the mobility related to care. And so this care block operates in the same fashion. We have an anchor building, the one that was in the picture, that's also anchored to the cable car, reducing the time women spend around care. And we've articulated to a caring center, a public school, a public park, where we all offer services for caregivers, care receivers, and their families. Next. Then we have care buses. So we already have 16 care blocks operating today in the city, but and we've started them, as I was mentioning, in existing infrastructure. But what happens to areas of the city that don't have existing infrastructure, or the rural area, as I mentioned, of Bogota, which is 75% of our territory? Well, we designed buses. So buses go to these areas, which are deprived of infrastructure, or the rural areas, and we offer a shorter, like a condensed version of care blocks. Basically, care buses are the mobile version of care blocks. So as you see in the picture on your left, we transformed the bus inside for it to work as a classroom. And at the same time, if you look in the first picture close to the bus, you see an inflatable tent. So while women jump on the bus to finish high school, learn how to use computers or other types of services, for instance, they hear legal aid and free psychological aid, their children and people, the elderly, are cared for in those inflatable tents. Next. But there's a third population, which is the hardest to reach, which is those women that are at home, caregivers that can seldom leave their homes given the permanent condition or semi-permanent condition of the people they care for. So some women are basically trapped at home, caring all day, highly isolated. So we are taking the home assistance program to them. While we care for their people with disabilities in the same space in their home, we offer caregivers two options. One, free time for themselves, but at the same time, and also the possibility of being certified by the National Apprenticeship Service. The National Apprenticeship Service evaluates how caregivers operate and how they offer their service, sees if they need to complement anything and be trained. And once that process is due, they're offered a certificate, which helps them find jobs when the person or the people they care for are no longer there. Next. And so where are we going next? When we leave this administration by the end of this year, in December of this year, we plan to leave 20 care blocks functioning. But we also included care as a guiding principle of our master urban plan. So that's why I mentioned at the beginning that it's also an innovation related to how we plan cities and cities for women, and thinking of new ways to organize cities and also tackle the climate crisis, for instance, and basic inequality in cities. So we included care as a guiding principle at the same level of environmental factors or transportation factors. And we plan to build 25 more care blocks by 2035. Next. Part of the most wonderful aspect of building a care block and care system is that we've received the input of many organizations and happily won a few of these recognitions. Next. And so that is what we're creating. We're creating a better city for women. And when we create a better city for women, putting care at the center, thinking of those who sustain life, we have more equitable cities that can innovate at the master urban plan level, at the climate change level, and for attaining equality. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. I'm sorry, you're muted.
Oh, here I am.
Okay. All right. Thank you so very much, Secretary Rodriguez. I'm really excited that you're bringing in the feminist economic principles of, reduce, recognize, and redistribute around care. I think it's fundamental. You have also taken women from isolated spaces to the public. And in that transition, I think women are safer, and the levels of violence potentially can reduce because of that. And I'm excited in the future to see how we can really work together in recognizing this inextricable link potentially between the increase of care and safety. So I am now going to move on to our next speaker. And we are going to hear from Reykjavik. And we have right now Freya Rose Waldemarsdorf, who will be joining us. She is a specialist in education at the Federation of State and Municipal Employees. And we'll speak very specifically about the work around the city of Reykjavik. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction. And thank you for having me here. I think not to be able to turn on my video or if I can get help with that. Now you can see me. Hi. Yeah, I'm located now in New York for the CSW 67. It has been a great time this year, like always. I will start sharing my presentation with you. And I want to tell you about innovation of cities for economic rights. I'm going to tell you stories of unity and inspiring women. The innovation of cities for economic rights. I cannot start my presentation with any other picture than this one. It is the most important act for gender equality or equal pay, I would say, gender equal pay. This is a picture for 24th of October 1975, when most of women in Iceland did not go to work and stepped out of their homes to go downtown in Reykjavik, and they were fighting for equal pay. With this act, they wanted to show that the labor market and the household, they could not function normally without their contribution. And there are many stories from like dysfunctional workplaces from this day, and not least households. One of my favorite stories is that hot dogs, for example, they sold out in Reykjavik, and perhaps in other cities as well, at least in Reykjavik, because that was the meal that most men or fathers were able to cook, they knew how to cook. So by this act, they did not just show their worth in the labor market, but also in their unpaid jobs. Women in Iceland, they have repeated this act a few times. And we organize it so if you start working at 9 and at certain hour, certain time, you work for free. For example, in 2005, after 1408, you work for free. In 2010, 1425. In 2016, 1438. There's a big picture there. Women worked for free after 1550. We've had big gatherings, but we always calculate when we are working for free. And of course, this makes women angry. The single most effective tool to bridge the gender pay gap is the one that municipalities in Iceland, Reykjavik, and other municipalities are using. That is a job evaluation system that they use. Usually, in our society, jobs are valued around how much money you are responsible for. But with this system, they changed the valuation so that women's jobs get more evaluated. For example, care work. And for example, like a woman working in a kindergarten with all the noise, for example, that she has to have in her work all day, now women got a raise, for example, for those kind of evaluations, different valuations. And this is a picture, perhaps it's hard to see or read it, but it's just a way to show that there are different ways to evaluate jobs. And the system that Reykjavik and other municipalities in Iceland are working on is actually from the UK, but changed so it works for Icelandic society. And that had a huge effect when they took this into place. For example, in 2014 and 2016, they made most of the changes towards hiring the evaluation of women's jobs. And when we talk about adjusted pay gap, it went from 5.1 to 3.12 in just 1 year, just by changing the job evaluation system. And those numbers show us that we are going in the right direction. We have a long way to go. But you can also see that the municipalities, with their job evaluation systems, it's working out. The least difference is the most difference is in the private market. You can see, like, if you take all working people in Iceland, in 2019 it's 13.9, and 2021 it's 10.2. The private market, 14.8 and 13.9. The state, 14.0 till 10.0. They changed their, they took up partly a new job evaluation system. So that worked. But the municipalities have had it for a longer time. So now it's like, so 2021 is the newest number we have. It's 6.1. We have a long way to go, but we can see that some tools work better than others. Parental leave, that's on a state level, but I just wanted to emphasize to talk about the parental leave. It's not just Reykjavik, it's the whole state. We have a new law from 2021. We introduced paternity leave in 2000. We've had that since 2000. And fathers just take paternity leave in Iceland. It just happened that way. They don't take, before we had like 3 months for fathers, 3 months for mothers, and 3 months to share. The fathers do not take the share part, they mostly take their part. So what we did in 2021, the state did with new law, where the division between parents is 6 and 6. So it's actually equal. There was a huge opposition against this, but like the feminist NGOs and the Federation of Unions and the Prime Minister and the ruling political parties, they all wanted this way, and that was the end result. There are weeks that are transferable. So it's 6 weeks. It's hard to apply for it, but you can. So it can be like one parent 4.5 and the other parent 7.5 months. And I have never been so excited to see hard to wait for new numbers. like the numbers we will have, and it's probably just in 2 years because you can use your leave for a long period. But yeah, that will be very exciting to see if we can change the law and make the parents take equal parental leave. And the ones that were lobbying for parental leave, that was the Women Alliance. It was a political party, both on city level in Reykjavik and Akureyri, and the state level in parliament. And they talked about parental leave and paternity leave, especially long before it was in law. And the one, so I'm going to talk about 3 remarkable women. The first one, so this is a segue from parental leave to Ingibjörg Sólrún Gísladóttir. She was a mayor 1994 to 2003. And what she did, she completely changed the childcare system in the city. So you get a feminist, a woman, head of the city, and I would not say single-handedly. Of course, she cannot do all the work by herself, but she initiated it for sure. She also just mainstreamed feminist values in the city. And that had a lot of effect. And after her long career in Icelandic politics, she started working for the UN and also OSCE. And now she's back in Reykjavik doing various jobs. And the next woman I wanted to mention is Steinunn Valdís Óskarsdóttir, sorry. She was mayor for 2004 to 2006. And what she did this single act to raise the lowest paid workers, and they were mostly women, working for the city. And by that, she hired the salaries of women in the city and lowered, bridged the gender pay gap. She is now in charge of CEO of the Equality Office of the State of Iceland. And last but not least is the chair of the Federation of Employees of the State and Municipalities, Sonja Ýr Þorbergsdóttir. For, I would say, maybe last 10 years, she fought for shortening the work week, or sometimes called the 4-day work week. And that's actually what she has already established through bargaining agreements a few years back, maybe 2 years ago. And the ink was not yet dry when she started working on her next big step or big project, and that is creating new ways to increase the value of women's jobs, to use the job evaluation system in other places than the municipalities, and also to just, like I say, create new ways, and that's what she is doing now with her team. She's looking through, to like New Zealand and Canada, where they have been doing remarkable work towards equal pay or pay equity. And so I just say thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Frida. And one of the key elements around here is about increasing value of care, right? And I think world's problems will be solved very differently if care in itself was valued in the way it should. We are now moving on to the United States. I'm going to bring on Nancy Bremo. This is the Santa Clara county commissioner from the US, and she's going to talk to us about a national campaign and a pledge that is ongoing. And after that, I'm going to hand over to Sun Yung, and we will then hear from Elizabeth Gumman, who is from the city of Vienna, and really connect into this kind of thread of care and centering care. And she is speaking to us from the Department of Education after Nancy. Nancy, the floor is yours. Hi, Nancy. Great. Good to see you.
Hello. It's wonderful to be here. I have to say, I'm almost speechless. I'm stunned and so inspired by what we just heard. I cannot wait to take these ideas back and start discussing them with our local city and county governments. So before I start, I just wanted to say that one of the important things that we started off with this morning was the discussion about CEDAW ratification at a national level, which, as most of us know here in the United States, we're one of only 5 members of the United Nations which have not ratified CEDAW at the national level. We've tried, and we've been trying for quite a long time. What we've done instead is look to our cities and counties, our local jurisdictions. And this is one of the things that is so unique and amazing about CEDAW versus the Equal Rights Amendment here in the US, which has to be ratified, and it's a constitutional amendment. With CEDAW, we can adopt ordinances locally in our cities and counties. And that's what we're doing at this point. We tried going the national route. Then we had San Francisco, and thanks to Krishanti, thank you so much, who brought CEDAW to the first city. I believe it was the first city in the world to ever adopt a CEDAW ordinance, or a United Nations treaty. So that was hugely important. And what we've done in the following 20 years is continue that effort to roll it out city by city, county by county. This is where innovation takes place. This is where human rights are the most important and relevant. So basically what I've done is I've started an organization called the CEDAW Challenge Team. And the CEDAW Challenge Team borrows from, I should call it version 2.0 of the original CEDAW Challenge, which was done about 7 or 8 years ago in 2014, around the same time that Cities for CEDAW was founded. At that point, we had a mayor in San Francisco. His name was Ed Lee, and he was hosting the United States Conference of Mayors that year. And one of the things he did is he put out a challenge to all the mayors who attended the conference. In fact, you can still find him. There's a video on YouTube that shows him actually making that challenge. And he was so successful, he had, I believe it was 200 mayors who signed this commitment saying they would go home and pass resolutions and adopt ordinances. And of course, about half of them went home and were actually successful in getting things started. Some of them went home and lost their next election or what have you, but it was a huge step actually. And one of the most successful ones was Mayor Eric Garcetti from Los Angeles, who went home and within a year, he had adopted an ordinance and begun implementing it. And that remains one of his proudest accomplishments that he did while he was mayor of Los Angeles. So in the intervening years, we picked up on that idea and thought it was such a great concept that about a year ago, about 15 months ago, we formed the CEDAW Challenge team and launched the challenge again. And this time our champion was one of my local supervisors here in Santa Clara County. She's currently the president of the Board of Supervisors. Her name is Susan Ellenberg. She took our new version 2.0 of the CEDAW Challenge to the California State Association of Counties, as well as the Urban Association of Counties here in California. And I will drop a link in the chat to the actual challenge document. It's targeted at elected officials and appointed officials. And basically what it is, it's a pledge, it's an endorsement, it's not a legally binding document, but what it does is it starts the conversation. It gives us a door, it opens a door to having those conversations. So we ask our elected officials to sign this document, which basically says that they support the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination, and they support it as it being adopted locally. And then what we do is we work with a network of women's commissions. Here in California, we have 26 women's commissions, and we go to them and we give them the document, and we show them who from their jurisdiction has signed it. And then it's their job to go and meet with those elected officials, nurture those champions, ask them to put it on their agendas at their city council meetings, their board of supervisor meetings, and get the process started. So it's sort of a Kickstarter. And it has been very successful. In fact, what's really interesting is we have within our legislature here in California, we have what's called the Women's Legislative Caucus, which is an organization of our women's state senators and assembly members. And one of our most powerful state senators, Senator Nancy Skinner, got wind of this CEDAW challenge that we were taking around the state. And she loved it so much, she said, you know what, we need to take this to the state level. So we're really excited you're doing it at the city and the county level, but let's take it to the state. That was an effort that had actually been attempted about 5 or 6 years ago, but hadn't quite made it all the way to the end. So this year, thanks to Senator Skinner, we have a bill going through the California legislation right now, which will bring CEDAW principles to the operations at the state level, to all the departments that the state runs. So it's a really exciting thing. We're seeing a lot of momentum building around this. In the past 12 months, both the County of Los Angeles, because remember it was the city previously, but now the county has adopted an ordinance, which is phenomenal. And then the next step was we had the County of San Diego adopt an ordinance within the last 12 months. I think it was last June. And that was a real, that was a huge change because San Diego tends to be on the more conservative side. Seeing them adopt the ordinance and now they're going into implementation has become a motivation for the rest of the counties. So I am appointed to the Santa Clara County Commission on the Status of Women. We've been working on this for 24 years. 24 years ago, the county passed a resolution supporting the national ratification of CEDAW. 5 years after that, they passed a local resolution supporting the integration of CEDAW. And then 15 years after that, they passed a temporary ordinance, which expired last year. So all this to say, it's taken us 24 years and we're in the final phase right now within the next 3 to 4 weeks of adopting a full permanent sustainable CEDAW ordinance. From there, we can start the implementation. And the ideas that I'm hearing here today are absolutely incredible. And these are things that we want to bring back. So what I'm going to do, again, as I said, is drop the link in the chat. If anybody on this call today is an elected official or an appointed official, we'd like you to sign it right away. Doesn't matter where you live. This is a global document. We are focusing it on California, but its intention is national and global. And we want to show the support from all over. And if you if you are not an elected or appointed, I invite you to take that link and take it home and bring it to your elected officials, get them to sign on to it, and then use it as a discussion and to open a door. I'm also available. I'll drop in my email address. We have a Facebook page called the CEDAW Challenge Team, and I'm always open for conversations. I'd love to help talk to anybody who's interested on how to get the conversation started, because bringing this home to a city or a county, and this is another thing, a lot of people are not always familiar with CEDAW. Not everybody knows just off the top of their head, what is CEDAW? What does it mean? People are familiar here in the US with the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment, but not as much so with CEDAW. So I'm here, I'm mentoring jurisdictions all across the state and available to help in any way. So thank you so much. And thank you, Krishanti.
Thanks a lot, Nancy. This is an extraordinary challenge, and we need to take it on and move it forward if for women in the United States to really realize their full potential and human rights. Just for everyone on the call, one of the things around the ratification in the United States is that the president signs it, as previously was mentioned. President Jimmy Carter signed it. Then it goes to the State Department to really look at the laws and how CEDAW is compatible with the national laws, and goes to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee for a vote, right? And we have had 2 committee votes prior to this. And once the Senate Foreign Relations Committee votes on it, then it goes to the Senate floor of the United States. And CEDAW needs 67 votes for it to get passed to be ratified. So we are not there yet, unfortunately, and it has been too long that women of the United States have been deprived of this very essential treaty. From now, here on, I am going to an incredible city, Vienna. I had the ability to visit Vienna to really look at how they are making the city actually a feminist city. And here we have Elizabeth Gupman, who is the associate in the Vienna Department of Education, to really speak about the kindergarten system that they have. It is an extraordinary system that very specifically during COVID, that was the strength of the entire city. So here we have Elizabeth joining us right now. Thank you. Elizabeth, it's not clear. We are not hearing you. You're not clear yet. Perhaps if you could maybe put your camera off and then join us just on audio, if that's possible. We still don't hear you, Elizabeth. Sorry, your audio is still not coming through. Earlier on during testing, it worked. Hello?
Krishanti, this is Sue Young. I suggest that we go on to the next item and come back to Elizabeth.
That will be great. Thank you. And Elizabeth, we will get back to you. Sunyun, I'm handing it over to you. Thank you so much.
Just temporarily, so that we can just carry on with our program here. We have heard such great ideas, innovative contributions to implementation of women's rights, bringing global local, and you are all making history. The history part of this movement that we have now is really an important thing to capture as it's happening so that future generations can really understand why and how the women's movement, feminist movement, brought these changes into the modern era. And that brings us to the Cities for CEDAW History and Futures project, of which I am co-director with Jessica Pearson. And I'm going to let Jessica explain what this project is, but let me introduce three wonderful people who are working on this project. Jessica Pearson is the American representative for the North American representative for the International Alliance of Women. She wrote her master's thesis on the Cities for CEDAW campaign, an expert. She holds a master's degree in human rights from Columbia University and a wonderful degree from musical theater at the New School. I am so lucky to work with her. Another person you'll meet in this segment is Samyukta Setmatahapan, who is a senior researcher and legal advisor for the Cities for CEDAW campaign. She completed her undergraduate law degree at the London School of Economics, where she focused on, imagine this, algorithmic content moderation and artificial intelligence. She has worked for the Physicians for Social Responsibility in Washington, D.C., where she focused on environmental security and nuclear disarmament lobbying. Then we have Anchita, who is Anchita Gupta, joining us from India, who is also one of our senior researchers and advisors. Her thesis at Oxford University was on resistance movements for collective self-determination. She received her AB in History, Middle Eastern Studies from Brown University, and she is fluent in Arabic. She has published papers on Palestine and resistance movements all around the world. Jessica, I give you the floor.
Thank you so much, Soon Young, and hello, everyone. It's such an honor to be here today amongst these incredible women, and I'm excited to be in conversation with my colleagues about the Cities for CEDAW History and Futures project. So a little bit about our project. The purpose is to collect documents and stories related to the Cities for CEDAW campaign from its founding in 1998 to present. And our aim is to analyze its historic contributions to hopefully inform strategies for future campaigns. And the project hopes to capture personal stories from activists, some of which are on this call today, as well as archive important documents and multimedia resources that tell the story of Cities for CEDAW and its successes, challenges, and possible new directions. And by the way, when we say cities, we don't just mean cities, we mean states and counties, as Nancy spoke about, who have also implemented CEDAW as well. So phase one of this project took place last summer with 14 researchers, some from the Philippines and who I see on this call. So give yourself a shout out in the chat. And also from Germany and the US, who organized and documented materials related to the jurisdictions in the US that have implemented CEDAW. And phase two of our project consisted of creating indicators for what a successful CEDAW city might look like, and conducted an in-depth analysis of each city's successes, challenges, innovations, implementation, and accountability mechanisms. So as Soon Young mentioned, I am happy to be joined today by our two incredible senior researchers and legal advisors to the project, Anchita and Samyukta, who have been integral to phase two of this project and who we've been working together since the fall. So Anchita and Samyukta, I have some questions about your research, but first, I hope you can share with us about why you were interested in this project and how you conducted your analysis of the CEDAW cities. Maybe we could start with Anchita and then go to Samyukta.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jessica and Soon Young, for such a wonderful introduction. So yeah, let me start by talking a little bit about my interest in grassroots organizing, which Soon Young described is what drove my master's thesis and some of my undergraduate research. So I think that is what fascinates me most about the Cities for CEDAW initiative, because I'm interested in the idea of law evolving out of what the people are working on the ground for. And of course, CEDAW isn't like that in that the CEDAW already exists internationally, but at least through the process of, lobbying for resolutions and ordinances at the grassroots across the US, the organizers are able to bring to light some of the issues that are most important to them locally. So that has been really fascinating to study, to see that, access to safe abortions, the recognition of women of color who are at more risk for discrimination or trafficking in certain states. Those are the things that are driving movement building at the ground. That has been really fascinating for CEDAW. And I think it's also exciting to me because as someone who is interested in thinking of the law critically, it raises the question of areas in which CEDAW isn't quite there yet, because CEDAW was at the end of the day an international Bill of Rights that came out in the 1980s, and we are currently in 2023. So I think the fact that a lot of critiques, a lot of activists and scholars who work on CEDAW raise the fact that it doesn't include ideas about equality for trans and non-binary women, the fact that it doesn't include, discrimination against women of certain minorities, ethnic minorities, intersectional discrimination, things of the sort, of that sort, things such as care work. These are some of the things that CEDAW doesn't include. And listening to grassroots organizers talk about that and movement built around that gives us an idea of where CEDAW can go in the future. So I think that is what interests me most and drew me here.
Thank you, Archita Asamyuka.
Thank you so much, Jessica, and also thank you, Sun Young, for the lovely introduction. So my interest in Cities for CEDAW lies primarily in my interest for studying more about women's rights and also its interdisciplinary interaction with other issues. So CEDAW as an instrument is a living and breathing instrument, and I think Cities for CEDAW allows us to, in the 21st century, as Anchita said, view it as an instrument that is constantly being updated, constantly being rethought, and having principles updated and re-examined in line with the values that we currently hold. And Cities for CEDAW being a project that is so locally based makes that even more interesting coming from a grassroots organizing perspective. So my background primarily comes from the academic study of international law and women's rights and women's issues. So from a professional and academic standpoint, that's what drew me to the project, having examined CEDAW from a purely international perspective. That is what interested me in the overall project, but also from a personal level, having worked and having lived across 4 continents over the years, I guess my personal experiences of gender have always come from a very comparative perspective. So viewing CEDAW as a international instrument that is primarily top-down and looking at things from a comparative perspective, albeit extremely interesting from a personal and academic standpoint, viewing CEDAW from a local perspective, comparing what different cities and counties are doing, I think is even more interesting to see the nuances and the differences and just how developed gender-based legislation can really be. So I find that to be the most interesting part of the Cities for CEDAW project. So the way I've looked at it and examined it has primarily been from the substantive differences and nuances that ordinances and resolutions have been able to inject into existing CEDAW principles, as well as the more pragmatic realities of trying to execute these within local jurisdictions.
Thank you so much. And given your analysis of the CEDAW cities, what can you share with us maybe 3 ideas that really stood out to you as innovative in protecting and expanding women's rights in their jurisdictions? Maybe you could give us some examples of that. We can start with Anchita again.
Yeah, again, the thing that was most fascinating to me was the grassroots network networks that were built between, women organizers across different groups. So one thing that we noticed in our analysis is a lot of the, we were just hearing about California. So similar to that, in many states, a lot of the cities and county organizers come together, and in the process, a number of cities in the same area end up having a resolution or an ordinance. And by having some conversations with the organizers there, we understood that this is because they are working together, they're inspiring each other, and they're creating a community of, women activists who are essentially building the base on which this movement is going forward. And so that has been very interesting, because community building is both historically, both the history and the future of, organizing for any sort of movement. So that is something that I believe that definitely drives Cities for CEDAW forward, and is one of the ways in which we can ensure that the U.S. Senate ratifies the bill eventually. The other thing I think is also, though we've understood this from a conversation with organizers from the County of Fairfax. So we talking to Teresa and Simi, who were the organizers there, we realized that a lot of the times these resolutions are very bare bones in how it comes across, but that is intentional, because they're trying to create a framework within which policymakers and activists and different groups can come in and create more specific legislations which have a funding mechanism, a monitoring mechanism, which is not possible for an ordinance or a bill which is as large as the CEDAW bill, because it's a framework for women's equality rather than something specific. It covers everything. So I thought that was also very interesting, because you're paving the way as the future, as women's rights and the movement evolves, there'll be different issues that based on the framework that they're creating. And another thing that I found fascinating was the insertion of issues that are important locally into the debates, even if they don't make it into the final outcome of the resolution or the ordinance, because a lot of times we saw that the meeting minutes and debates revolved around topics such as abortion or trafficking, which didn't end up in the final text of the resolution or ordinance, because it's so controversial in so many states, and you can't include that if you want a wide majority of people to support you in local government. But at the same time, it's so important to have the debates and to start the conversations, because the resolutions and ordinances that aren't the Cities for CEDAW one will follow in the future, which will come from the conversations, come from the networks that you're building. So I thought that these are some of the areas in which Cities for CEDAW is really building a grassroots structure that will push the movement forward and ensure that it always maintains its momentum.
Thank you so much for sharing those insights, Anchita. Samyukta.
So I guess there are three key features that I picked up on during the course of my research. I think firstly, there were some substantive features within ordinances and resolutions that were extremely unique, and I think really pushed beyond what CEDAW had already set up in order to facilitate. So just to name a few, some ordinances and resolutions, naming Orange County, for example, listed some demographic characteristics that were linked with gender, such as coming from an immigrant background, having a disability, being an older woman, etc., that were all very pivotal to the way that we view what women need within a certain county or a city. So that was incredibly useful for really framing the debate in a way that was more intersectional beyond the traditional understanding of intersectionality that we generally have for women's issues. Secondly, there was this idea that was brought in one of the resolutions, Irvine County, California, of the importance to implement CEDAW not only in the government, from a government realm, but also within the private sector, which was a very unique addition. Also having specific departments within governments go through gender trainings, which is something that we saw across most resolutions, which is a very fantastic call, very practical call to action. And also providing women support from an economic level. So for example, providing support for women who own small businesses. Also, another substantive key characteristic that Miami-Dade County's resolution possessed was an emphasis on data collecting and reporting, which I will probably speak about a little bit later with respect to how important that is to really understand progress in the field of women's rights and resource allocation. Next, the provision to set up work with the provision to set up or also work with local governments, women's local commissions and task forces is incredibly important, and something which was very notable in particular resolutions such as in the Santa Monica resolution and Santa Clara's resolution as well. So having these women's commissions is incredibly important, mostly from the perspective of having and being able to engage with local community and grassroots campaigns and organizing to make sure it's consistent with what already exists within a particular jurisdiction, but also to make it more culturally sensitive and integrate local priorities into whatever ordinance or resolution is trying to convey. And finally, the idea of thinking about things from a gender perspective, even setting that analysis and setting that intention through a resolution or ordinance is incredibly important, and something that we saw in quite a lot of the resolutions and ordinances. So reading gaps in previous resolutions or trying to frame future resolutions that are gender sensitive. So these are all three very noteworthy things that we saw in our research.
Thank you. And thank you both for your in-depth analysis. It's so interesting to hear from you both. And I want to ask Anchita, where do we want to learn more?
For me, I think an area which we struggled to work on during our research was the lack of documentation, especially documentation around the movement building part of things, because we can access the government records, we can even access the drafts of resolutions for some cities, but what we don't have is access to the minutes of the meetings, the conversations that you had between organizers, between activists across groups, how the debates, the theoretical functional debates that you have within your coalition, the earlier stages, the people you decided to approach, like who were your allies, who were who was difficult to have this conversation with. That I think is very important, not only for us as researchers, because I'm interested in history, so I'm naturally interested in this part of things, but also because it's the future of the movement, because there'll be so many other cities, so many other people in the future who will want to movement build, who will want to build on what you're doing now and what the organizers are doing in each of the cities. And having this resource documented, having this institutional memory is so important. And that is what sustains the movement, because you can't just have good leaders now who are successfully producing an outcome, but you also need to create this mechanism which ensures that whatever kind of leaders come in the future, the system sustains this. So I think moving forward, I would recommend that cities for CEDAW creates this process for people to document and create institutional memory for all of the campaigns in all of the cities.
Well said. Thank you, Anchita. And to wrap us up, I have one final question for Samyuktha. Can you tell us about what you think Cities for CEDAW's impact will be on the world?
That's a great question, Jessica. So as has been previously stated on this panel, the US is one of only a few countries that have not yet ratified CEDAW. So I guess it's very unique. The circumstances of Cities for CEDAW are quite unique when situated with the rest of the world and the way that the rest of the world has interpreted CEDAW. But having said that, there is great value to having such a project and having local communities and grassroots movements really engage with CEDAW. And I think primarily looking at that, the symbolic value of setting intentions, setting the gendered angle and intersectional point of view towards viewing gender issues on a more local level has immense symbolic value, and can also have very great and very fantastic instrumental value if we choose to think about gendered principles when we interpret existing pieces of legislation and existing policies that already exist. So I understand that local structures, local government structures, and legislative structures are different all over the world. So such a project may not be able to be replicated. It won't be able to be replicated the same way that it is in the US. However, I think definitely local cities and governments that are able to pass such whether it's even a very a one-page resolution ordinance document detailing their intention to abide by CEDAW, or whether it's something more comprehensive, whether it's setting up a task force, all of these things that can be inspired from the Cities for CEDAW project would all have a fantastic symbolic and instrumental value in improving women's rights, as well as being more culturally sensitive to the needs of a local population. So, I mean, CEDAW is absolutely fantastic, but Cities for CEDAW and such a similar project definitely ensures that it doesn't exist as just a blanket solution, and it's more tailored to every other place in the world that intends to abide by it.
Hey, thank you so much, Antija and Samyukta, for your insights and analysis, and to all of our researchers that have worked on this project. We're so grateful and lucky to work with you. And thank you to the Cities for CEDAW advocates who have worked tirelessly for gender equality. You inspire us so much to want to learn more about your strategies and what you're doing in your jurisdictions. So thanks for letting us share about this project, and I'll turn it back over to Soon-Young and Krishanti.
Thank you very much, Jessica. We are going to try to go to Elizabeth right now. Elizabeth, are you available to speak with us from Vienna?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Perfectly. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank
Go
you for
ahead.
your patience. Hello. Now I'm able. I tried to, connect with my phone now because I'm still at the office. So it's a bit embarrassing that our internet connection is so bad. I'm very happy, to speak to you from Vienna. So, yes. First of all, I'm working for the department of the city of Vienna, which is like running the communal kindergartens, the Stadtwien Kindergärten. And in Vienna, it is possible for every child living here to attend free kindergarten from the age from 0 to 6 years under certain circumstances. I think it is interesting to share some background information about Vienna and its history, to get to know that it is so special also in Austria to have such a good childcare infrastructure. So as the capital city of Austria, Vienna is by far also the largest city with approximately 9 million people living in Austria. There are about 2 million people living in Vienna. And also the political history of Vienna is very particular for the Austrian context, because it has been ruled by the social democratic spirit for more than 100 years now. So that means that Vienna has a long history of social welfare and supporting system, and also a very long tradition of like women attending the labor market, especially working in manufacturers from beginning of the last century. So after the First World War, there were these, huge community buildings built in Vienna all over the city, and there were always like kindergartens, advice centers for women, for mothers, clinics and sport fields, also coffee houses and libraries together in one building. So attending a kindergarten has a very long tradition in Vienna. And it was a very early means to support the individuals and also for being part of this like social community. And nowadays, Vienna has still an outstanding position as the laws and regulations of the early child care and early education are under the supervision of each federal state in Austria by itself. So the territory of the Federal Republic of Austria consists of like 9 federal states, and where Vienna is the federal capital and also a genuine federal state. So there is a general Austrian federal law that regulates only the aims and purposes of early childcare system, as well as the formal education of kindergarten teachers. And there's also an obligatory last year in kindergarten for the 5-year-olds living in Austria, while all the other things belong to the federal states themselves. So like opening hours or the staff ratio, that is something that like, you know, each federal state can, you know, manage for themselves. And as I mentioned, in Austria, it is obligatory for every child from the age up to 5 to attend at least 1 year in kindergarten before going to primary school, which starts usually at 6. And for this period, it has to be granted that every child has free access to early care and early education in Austria. And for childcare in Vienna, that means the city also provides, like, you know, financial support for the fees to private kindergartens. The childcare in Vienna, there are, like, you know, the day nurseries for children from 0 to 3, and there are the kindergartens for children from 3 to 6 years. And as the city of Vienna is the largest stakeholder in Vienna in early childcare and year education, it holds about 40% of all early childcare institutions in Vienna. In fact, there are about like 360 public kindergartens and about like 36,000 children attending a public kindergarten in Vienna. As I said, the access to a public kindergarten in Vienna is free for at least half of the day, or at least like 20 hours a week. And the parents or families will only have to pay for the children's daily lunch, which is approximately like 70 euros as a monthly contribution. The city pays for the breakfast and for the afternoon snacks. And there are also like some special additional fees for like additional services as visiting the kindergartens at extended opening hours. There are no additional other fees to pay, like all the handcraft material or birthday cakes for children are free and will also be like, will be baked with the children in the groups by themselves to give, like, you know, every child and the same opportunities. And it's also some kind of, you know, support for the parents or families, not only in a financial way. I think these extended opening hours of the Viennese public kindergartens are very important, especially affecting the caring duties of women and their ability to participate in like hired labor. There are only like 2 general closing days around Christmas and New Year's Eve for our public kindergartens. But the general opening hours are between like 6:30 a.m. in the morning and until like 5:30 p.m. in the afternoon. And there are also like 4 public kindergartens in Vienna whose closing time is at 8 p.m. While the needs for early childcare in kindergartens for children between 3 and 6 years can be fully covered in Vienna, especially for children from like 0 to 2 years. It is harder to provide places in public kindergartens. So another important aspect concerning especially the situations of women's duties in care work is that there are certain criteria which are taken in consideration when giving access to kindergarten places for especially very young children in Vienna. So if the parents or the person who are in charge of, like, you know, caring for a child are working or attending some kind of educational programs, then these are main aspects to get the access to public kindergartens for, you know, especially very young children. There are also other factors that are taking contribution when providing and planning the access to kindergarten for very young children, like the whole socioeconomic background of the family, and also the age of the child. As I mentioned, concerning the participation of children from 0 to 3 years, Vienna surpasses the aims that are given by the Barcelona Target of the European Union, which are given with 33%, and in Vienna a total of like 50% of all children living here from 0 to 3 attend some kind of early care program. For the age group from 3 to 6, our ratio is about 102%. That means that Vienna surpasses the aims given by the European Union with about like 90%. Yeah, so thank you so much for listening, and I'm happy for your questions later.
Hi, Prashanti, are you coming back to us? Monique, we need Prashanti's mic and we need the videos on.
Hi, I'm back.
So Prashanti, I'm going to let you close us and say your final words.
Okay, we are hoping that we can see all of you. This has been an extraordinary session. I wish we had another hour and a half to have gone in depth. It has been one of the fundamental things we have learned in this panel is for CEDAW to be successful in the United States and elsewhere, we must recognize that care is critical. Women's human rights and human rights of everyone could only be realized if care is valued, it's recognized, it's redistributed and reduced. So with that, we are going to close this session. And I'm hoping that everyone could get their cameras out, cameras open. Sunyun, are we able to close? All right, perfect.
No, except I know we don't have Q&A, but everyone wants to learn more about Bogota, Vienna, Reykjavik. So at least for Vienna, I can put in the chat their link that they shared about the child president in Vienna. And really want to thank you all for being such great activists and feminist leaders. We will see you again, I'm very sure, and visit us.